and aid development. Our work in education, in this case, in this context that we're talking about, we have done several projects for Mary MacKillop today for the project design for basically for basic education, as well as for other organizations in the country with the Child Fund as well for education. I'm looking forward to hearing from everyone else and how I can contribute or how I can learn from others in this platform, through this platform. I'm based in Sydney, so happy to meet other colleagues who lives in Sydney as well. I heard Helen just mentioned about Friends of Vemasi. I don't know who was here, and I'm from Vemasi, so it'll be to talk to. I live in Dili, but my parents are from Vemasi. So it will be, I would like to meet with the group and talk about how I can help, as well as all the other groups who exist in the country, not just in Sydney. Thank you.
So Helen, Christina, Gillian Lang, who is leaving at 6:30, is the president of Monash Friends of Vemasi. I'm a member.
Oh, so you're in it. Yes, that's right. Yes.
So we would be very, very keen to so perhaps you could leave your email in the chat for me.
Yeah, I will. I'll do that.
Thank you.
Now look, I'll just say something about email connections, because we do have actually a Google group, which I think it would be very appropriate for this group here to sort of take over and use for some discussions, because on email, brief little interaction. For example, the visit of Memencio to Sydney next week. A lot of people in Sydney on this group, there's a few Sydney people here, may wish to meet him and talk about, and even a little bit of discussion. I detected quite a bit of interest in this group in teaching of science using practical approaches. And that is something that I think needs a bit more discussion, even among the people who are working on interested in this in Australia, quite apart from the fact that in Timor, since Kurt Gabrielson left, a project was set up at the National Commission for UNESCO. Now, one of the members of that National Commission for UNESCO happens to be a member of our NGO, Life Skills Education, and very keen about this. And I'm hoping that this group can link in with the various projects of life skills education. One of our members had some discussion with Christina when she was in Dili on a program called the Junior Achievement. I don't know whether anyone here has heard of it or had any connection with it. It's about teaching practical economic skills while kids are still in secondary school, setting up a little company, that sort of thing. And there's a lot of project-based learning, inquiry-based learning, which some Timorese teachers are very keen to learn more about, but which is not coming through the mainstream training that they're getting. So I have invited some of you to join the Google group. Maybe if everyone agrees, I could add you to it, because maybe you didn't see the invitation, or maybe I know Stuart is now a member of it twice under his name, Stuart, and under the Science Nomad. And others, I think we could have some more detailed discussion and find out who's got different interests, because there are a lot of issues happening. And I'll just say one thing. Again, the whole debate about language of instruction in early literacy is come up. And, the idea that people could learn to read and write in Portuguese, or they can even speak it, seems to be getting around a bit, gaining a bit of traction. And I think we probably need some... the political parties, in my view, need to be influenced to have a different sort of debate about education. Now, Now, who else would like to say something? I'd better try and run this in a democratic fashion. Yes, Maura. Yes.
Yes, look, it would. I think the Google Docs is an excellent idea,
Mhm.
and depending, then we can look at how many subsets we had. You know, science,
Mhm.
education, formal,
Mhm.
informal, digital, whatever.
Yes.
We can then get a bit more organized around that, and we could even set up a WhatsApp group that can also share information and so on, as well as, of course, having an email list that we can use to meet up with the organized meetups and so on. So that would be really useful.
Yes, I find WhatsApp groups difficult to have discussion on, but maybe other people can know how to do it.
They're not so much long discussion. They're really about saying this is happening tomorrow or next
Oh, they're
week.
good for information. That's right.
Exactly.
Yes. In fact, we could. Yes. A WhatsApp group would help us get people together at the time and place on a Zoom meeting. You're right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes. But I think we can take advantage. Now, there's also, I mean, I have a Facebook group which has been going for quite a while now called Finding Pathways in Education in Timor-Leste, and that was set up after a VU conference of that name in 2015. But people put all sorts of educational material on that, and that can be used also. One of the things that today the Victoria University alumni in Dili had a lunch, and a lot of them are from different political parties, but have similar views on the problem we have in education, that every time a new minister comes in, policy changes again, old curricula that were developed get junked or never implemented. And so there is a big problem, I think, in the discourse that the political parties have or don't have about education isn't really highlighting the educational issues. I don't know whether anyone else would like to make a comment on this.
I think that applies to every other sectors as well. But yes, education, not just education, but health and infrastructure. Instead of continuing from the previous ministry or whoever the previous government have done, they just come and do their own thing. So at the end of the day, it's really messy, and everyone should be just focusing on the strategic development plan. But anyway, that's another issue. But I agree that education as an important sector for the country, unfortunately, whenever there's a new ministers or the new government, and there's always changing of the political view and perspective. And unfortunately also, there's no distinguished power between political power and administrative power. So that doesn't give much room to the director general and director.
True.
All the powers is in the ministry's power. That's unfortunately happens in every line ministries and every governments that come in.
Helen, can I just add to that? I agree completely with Christina. It's the political platform of the party. It's for example, in education, Fretlin really run the education portfolio, and they've got what they had planned to bring in from 1975, and they're still in the process of implementing that policy. And the minister, whoever it happens to come in, when Fretlin has power, they have to implement that Fretlin policy.
Well, that's a bit odd, because I recall I wrote my thesis on Fretlin from 74 to 78. And I noticed they introduced the idea of teaching literacy in Tetum. Fretlin brought teaching of literacy in Tetum in, but now they seem to be the ones that seem to think you can teach literacy in Portuguese. So there's obviously some lack of continuity. If what you're saying is true, there is some lack of continuity there. But again, it gets back to the fact that there is not a dialogue, a discourse, a debate. The media doesn't cover it. People are either too afraid or don't speak out on educational policy.
The problem of the issue of not continuing the same kind of initiative or idea is that donors or friendship groups like this or, you know, development partners or friendship groups or any other organizations that have good initiatives to come and support the government, they're stuck because every 5 years they have to renew again. They have to continue doing the same kind of things over and over again. And it's required time, and it's just wasting a lot of people's times, money, and all of that. And that's the thing that, you know, the government really, unfortunately, when you say the young people will go there and will do some changes, but if your boss not allowing you to speak up, they still, you know, you see a lot of young ministers there, but there's not much of changes happen. So I think it's academic, and people from outside needs to push more, as well as people inside individually, as well as academic.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else?
What about informal language education? Kind of like if I phrase this as the black market for language education, is there such a thing?
Now,
I think there's a real disconnect between policy at a government level and the reality on the ground, as we all know. I mean, when I was involved with the mother tongue program in Los Palos, I spent a lot of time in Los Palos. I speak Fataluku as well. There wasn't, I don't think I met anybody who didn't want their kids to learn in Fataluku. Whereas at the time, the political discourse on that was, oh, it's terrible. And it's so there's a real, I mean, just like the government's not listening to groups or the young people, they're not listening to people in the districts either.
Yeah.
Yes, look, that is right, I think, Katrina. Yes. Anyway, who else was wanting to say something?
Helen, Gillian is still with us. I don't think she's spoken yet.
Gillian, can you say something or write something? Or
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm from Monash
oh,
Friends.
there you are. Yes, good.
Sorry, and my apologies. I will have to leave soon after 6:30 because I had a conflicting appointment. Yeah, from our perspective with supporting a senior high school for a number of years, we've watched the change in the focus on language, and was quite worried to see the decree, I guess, from the Minister of Education as to the teachers at the high schools need to be teaching in Portuguese. And as we know on the ground, you know, the teachers aren't skilled enough to be, you know, teaching their subject matter in Portuguese. So, and one of the students on the last visit I made, you know, complained about the lack of textbooks in the science subjects. And this reminded me of what you said, Helen, about the fact that the textbooks are printed in Portugal and they're just not widely available for students to access. So, and we did talk about raising this issue with the political parties that were coming through Vamase, to mention about the importance of education and the fact they didn't have enough textbooks. So, yeah, I think it's trying to get that discussion at ground level that's important as well. I don't know if you wanted to add something, Tom.
No, I don't. That's certainly my experience, and when I've been to the Faculty of Exact Sciences, similar things are the case there, that students struggle with, particularly science subjects which require a knowledge of English. So I've spent some time talking to the staff of that faculty in English and informally doing that. But I agree with what Gillian said.
Anyone else got any comments? I know in relation to the secondary schools, when we visited the secondary schools, doing advising the minister on, somebody's trying to get in, advising the minister on reform of the secondary curriculum, we found there were rooms called libraries, but they weren't run by librarians. They were full of textbooks. But the schools did not know how to manage the textbooks, how to deal with them, how to give them out to the students. And the other thing that we discovered was that the secondary curriculum, the intellectual property of the secondary curriculum belongs to 2 private Portuguese publishers. It doesn't even belong to the government, so they can't reform it. They've got to completely do away with it and bring something else in, and that's why we advocated delivering the new curriculum to teachers online. But of course, they would all have to be properly trained. And the students do a subject called Technology as Multimedia, but they don't actually get onto the internet. They only learn Word, PowerPoint, Excel spreadsheet. But and hopefully when the fibre optic cable under the sea gets to Dili and they can actually have high quality internet out to all the rural areas, it should make a difference, but it won't make a difference unless proper educational preparation has been done. And I think these are issues that Friendship Cities could advocate on, or Timorese political parties could have a policy on. Because there is, I fear, a bit of a policy gap there.
Yeah, we've been recommended at the Carmelites with this training centre in Hera that once the submarine fibre optic cable is connected, there'll be a big need for tech training in the vocational education field, and that we should look at that as a possible area that we could, that there'll be a gap there and nobody else is running it yet. And yeah, so it's interesting, but I don't know anything about that field. We've been recommended to look at cybersecurity as a new employment field for Timorese, and online services. What's it called? Like online customer service via the internet that people could do from Timor, for global companies. So English language, but then also technology skills. It's going to be a big factor.
Mayra, can I ask, will that training centre be secondary or post-secondary?
Post-secondary, vocational training.
You see, we are having discussions with UNTL, we being Victoria University, are having discussions with UNTL about UNTL becoming a dual sector institution. In other words, having a TAFE sector, what we in Australia would call a TAFE sector. And a lot of those courses, the things that are now taught in secondary tech school in Timor-Leste, in Australia are taught at TAFE level, and probably increasingly in Timor should be taught at post-secondary TAFE level too, because now so many Timorese students are going to secondary school. The old junior tech schools were important when hardly anyone went to secondary school, but now a lot of them do. And they require, those curricula for those sort of courses require a solid professional association to devise the curriculum, such as the Computer Institute of Timor. I don't know whether such a thing exists. Anyone know if there's an IT professional association in Timor? I don't know.
I think Andrew Meyer had some involvement with. Yeah.
Look, Andrew Meyer did have a good organisation called Info Timor. He sadly lost interest in it when he got involved in carbon trading, and now the other thing he's doing, setting up corner stores, and unfortunately he took some of his good IT staff to go and work in bloody retailing. And I mean, I'd like to hear otherwise. I'd like to hear that it was still going, but I haven't heard that it is still going.
Helen, on the textbooks,
Yes.
just a comment on that, because I haven't been there for many years.
Yeah.
But in 2015, the school I was in, the kids actually wrote the textbook on the board, and the others that didn't have the book, they would write the book on their
they
book.
copy from the textbook onto the board. That's a common thing. Very common.
Okay, that is actually very good, because it actually kills two birds at the same time: literacy and also whatever they're learning. Now, I teach science, maths, and everything to do with technology. And to tell you the truth, books are of no use for this. It's better to have some sort of worksheet. Yes. And you can actually teach maths and science and technology without a book. True. Okay? You just create worksheets, and you get the kids through, and it's probably even better. You get them to discuss the issues rather than reading the book and memorizing the book. So probably they're going to learn better, in my view. It becomes experiential. One of the problems I found, though, in science, you can't do any experiment. There is nothing to do experiments. Or there wasn't at the time.
That's still largely true, even at UNTL.
To teach science or technology, because, but those things are so simple that it can easily be resourced. So what we need is teachers that actually can be entrepreneurs. They can find ways of doing things rather than having the book to go through.
Look, you're anyway, right. Yes, Judy, you've got your
on that point, Lewis. Kurt Gabrielson has developed everyday practical activities for the secondary school in science and mathematics.
How many teachers actually used them?
Look, there was quite a lot of training, and if they did, unfortunately, the secondary school I supported wasn't part of it, but there was quite a lot of training for a number of schools, but I don't know how many. Yeah.
Stuart, do you know anything about this?
I don't know about how much uptake there has been from Kurt's and others' work, but I was just typing a note into the chat there. It's common internationally in emerging communities that stressed or poorly supported teachers will feel this is what's in the textbook. I don't have that equipment. I can't do the experiment. That's kind of where it stops. That's partly through lack of training and fatigue and just lack of support. But as Kurt knows, as Judy knows, as many of us know, with just a little bit of capacity building and giving some examples, you can teach the most extreme, from the most basic to the most challenging concepts using some of the most simple materials. But that requires the teachers to understand how you apply that approach.
Look,
that's one of that is certainly one of the areas that would drive my interest in working with the Timor education system, as you know, Judy and others here would also, to get teachers to actually see that you don't have to take the illustration in the textbook as the recipe for how to do the experiment. It's the concept and how to work that just using everyday materials. You can't do everything, but 75–80% of the things you can.
Look, that's true, but I think the nature of the national exam at the end of year 12, a multiple choice test marked by a machine where you don't have to write anything or have any original thought, means that people see the textbook and they believe the nature of the task is to memorize it. And sadly, yeah, that is the discourse that goes over and above everything that Kurt Gabrielson, good stuff that he may have done. Judy, yes.
That can be overcome by having someone on that examiners group who deliberately puts in a kind of multiple choice question. That is, if it has to be multiple choice, that's based on them doing some kind of practical activity, and that changes teachers' attitudes very quickly. The other thing I'd like to say is that the Korean government, over 12 months ago, produced a number of booklets that were supposed to go into every school. Now, I haven't seen them. Kurt hasn't seen them. He can't get a copy of them. But there is that additional book for secondary schools, which I think might be practical based.
Well,
so if you can hunt that up, Helen, that would be wonderful.
We couldn't find a secondary school with a librarian who knew how to deal with books. The principals and the librarians basically in the public schooling system don't know how to deal with books. They put them in a room and leave them in their plastic packets and they sit there. We saw them. We saw large numbers of them. Now, until there is librarianship training at school librarian in every school, careers education, another thing we recommended, no careers education. Nobody's trying to think about why they need this knowledge. Why on earth would I need to know this science experiment knowledge? Because it's not contextualised with anything of any relevance to the students' lives. That's why we recommended it be contextualised within 15 of the Sustainable Development Goals. So you know you're doing your chemistry because you've got to improve your soil and you've got to improve, you know, the elements that need to be in the food for nutrition, and you have a holistic nature of what it's for. And this is, you know, what I think, that fixing up a couple of questions in the exam is not going to have any long-term impact at all. I don't know. I shouldn't be raving, yes. Anyone else got any comments?
This might be a little theoretical, but there was a concept in the book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance called the University Without Degrees, I think it was. And the concept was set up a university where people go to learn, but nobody ever gets a degree because the university is only there for learning. It's not for degrees.
Well, that's like the University of the Third Age, isn't it? But that's for people who are very old. That's not.
Yeah, that's a debate between inquiry learning and directive teaching. Okay, so that's we're forever going to have this debate. One is to really give information for the exam. The other one is actually to learn something useful.
And that's right.
Helen, can I say something, please?
Yes.
I just don't have any idea how we can do anything about these problems. I agree that there are the problems, but I don't know what we can do about it. Does anyone have any ideas about that?
It's in my view, it's about teachers. I don't know what's happening now because I haven't been there for a while. But when I was there, I noticed that the teachers cannot teach without a book. Okay, if it does not say in the book, they do not say it. They would not talk about it. Okay, I had an experience in a maths class where they were talking about quadratic equations, and I wanted to talk about when the b is negative, positive. The maths teachers will understand what I'm talking about. And I said we should talk about this, and she said no, we can't because it's not in the book. Until she came to a couple of pages later where that was talked about, because it was in the right place. So if it's not in the book, you can't teach it.
Yeah. Right. Well, look, maybe we should move the discussion a little bit to something that possibly a group like this could do something about. That is possibly helping Timor improve the quality of English teaching, which some of you have been involved in. And maybe, Rob Gray, if you could tell us a little bit about Teachers for Timor, which I think is a bit similar to the Willoughby. Anyway, can we talk a little bit about ways in which Australian people going there and not forgetting that, of course, that English is still largely taught in Timor by Indonesian methods of very large slabs of grammar before you're allowed to open your mouth with a conversation. So that's...
Yeah,
Rob,
very
you
much
want to
so.
say something? Yes?
Yes, Helen. What you say is very true. I've taught English in the schools as well as in our Teachers for Timor program. Our Teachers for Timor program was set up by largely retired primary teachers, Bron McNamee and people like that, quite some time ago, and was based on good primary teaching skills and sensible approach to teach all aspects of developing English in the students. And we've continued that through until today. We're at the stage where we're finding it difficult to get volunteers to go to an RO now. The people who have been going are sort of well retired and looking forward to settling down. It's proving difficult. However, that said, we always had the ambition that we would pass our program across to the Timorese in an RO if we could develop appropriate teaching skills. And fortunately, we have in Ainaro now a community centre, a youth centre that is promoting many different areas of learning, and one of those is English. And former students of ours are now volunteering to develop their skills in teaching and passing on what we've learned. So at the moment, our intent is to go and work not only on our program teaching English to senior high school students, but to work with volunteers from within the community who've had some exposure to our ways of teaching English. They now teach in their youth centre classes to younger students who are perhaps at the start of secondary schooling and so on. And that's got a lot of traction over there now.
Can I ask, Rob, the methodology or the system that you use to teach the high school or the senior high school and the volunteers in Ainaro, aside from what you mentioned about, provide them a training, what other method did you use for them to be, sometimes when you provide a training, the problem with training is that a lot of people have a training and learn now and then go home and put the books in a drawer and forget about it and come back the next day. So what methodology do you use in order for them to, to engage them more, to learn more, to have more, to eager to learn more the language?
Yep. As I say, we've got two aspects of our work over there that we're trying to maintain at this stage. In the classroom, actually, you visited us, Teachers for Timor in Ballarat, many, many years ago, along with Melanie Horn, and that was the development of our the English teaching program, which has become focused on the secondary high school students, the senior secondary students. The methodology that Bron McNamee and others developed was very much based on sound principles of learning the written words, the spoken word, just the full gamut of appropriate English skills at that level. We've found that by myself going and teaching in the secondary schools, that there's not a good crossover, obviously, with our methodology and what actually happens in the classrooms. And I've had a lot of students would come to me just before exam time and say, here's a practice exam. We don't understand what they're asking. The questions were quite convoluted and so on. So what they're examined on is technically really difficult because probably not written by people with sufficient skills in setting English exams. That said, the other aspect, I think, Chrissy, that the program where we're training the new volunteer teachers, we bring them into the program that they were in earlier as observers of our teaching practice, and we also attend their lessons and give them sort of a bit of a breakdown on, okay, here's how you approach this particular topic. Here are some resources that we would use. This is how we would do it. And occasionally we'll ask, can we interrupt and reteach a particular aspect of a lesson and say, okay, there's an approach that you can use, and they're very, very happy to pick up on those sort of things as you can spend time with them. They soak it up and certainly develop their skills. But early days and a long way to go.
Right. Well, I mean, one of the things that through some of the work that I did in back in the days when I was still in Timor, and you know, working with a lot of language institute, including Lely, which based in Dili. One of the things they use, which we suggested at the time, I was working for the Minister of Finance at that time as an advisor for the training center, is that to incorporate the authentic materials into English, to bring the interest from the people who is actually, you know, in Timor in this case, a non-speaking English country. So sorry that my video keep dropping, but I'm still here. So the teachers can use the materials that are relevant to the local contents or local culture to bring the interest from the students. That's one way. Another way is it's also to utilize games and activities so that they're familiar with wording aside from, and this is why I asked methodology when you say Melanie and the others are teaching, you know, writing word, speaking word and all that. What kind of system do you use to bring that interest from the students?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, very much. You know, every lesson has all sorts of aspects. I said before with, you know, the written word, learning vocab, speaking opportunities. We occasionally produce word sheets now. We've got our own printers and so on available. And as you said, games are fantastic for introducing lots of English language. And every class starts with games and finishes with games. Yeah, they're hilarious and terrific for building confidence in the learners.
Absolutely.
Rob, one thing I found when New South Wales sent ESL teachers to work with English teachers in high school in Dili, the ES methodology was wrong. It didn't work. They needed EFL, English as a foreign language methodology. The teachers had to learn on the spot because the methodology, Christina, was incorrect.
Yep.
The other thing, Rob, is that it's a whole thing about school culture. The whole school culture needs to want to make changes, because if that doesn't happen, the teachers will get nowhere. They'll be by themselves.
Yep, very much so. I found that when I worked in the high school in Inaro over the years, that that culture very rarely changes. You know, most of the time you're just filling gaps because teachers aren't there, and they use me to plug gaps in English classes and so on. Yeah, it becomes difficult to support even the English teachers who will go missing in action quite a bit, which is the usual thing. That's part of life in the districts and I guess elsewhere as well. That you do the best you can and provide them, you know, the English teachers with resources and explain the methodology that we would use. But invariably, when you see them go back to teaching, they'll revert back to the way that they were taught. And yeah,
right.
it's, yep, long, slow progress. Yep.
But mind you, Rob, when I did geography at high school, we spent all our lessons copying from the blackboard. So
yeah.
takes
Been there,
a
done
while
that.
for
Yep.
that age.
Yeah.
I think
Yes.
another thing which, if we're doing any kind of advocacy, would be for paying teachers more than they're currently paid, because you can have all the theories and all the resources in the world, but if you're doing a job for peanuts,
That's right.
it's
Yes.
very hard to be motivated about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Mm.
Katrina, what's the current wage now for a teacher?
Helen, you
Look,
probably was what, some
No,
200?
look, I'm not sure, but you know, there are a lot of teachers who are working as so-called volunteers because they have to work with visible, you know, the government does not employ all the teachers that it needs. The principals have to pick up so-called volunteers, which are often recent graduates who have to work as a volunteer for 5 years, then they might get a contract. It's really shocking. And you see, look, what astounds me is I don't know whether anyone else knows about this, but the MCC, the American Millennium Challenge Corporation, they were going to build a so-called Centre of Excellence in Teacher Training because they believed the nature of the problem was inadequate training of teachers. Now, in fact, quite a lot of well-trained teachers are coming out, but they're not actually getting jobs in the education system. And like so many other problems in all sectors in Timor, personnel issues are inadequately dealt with. They undermine the health ministry as well as the education ministry. And it's not just a matter of money. I mean, money is important. What Katrina says is true. There has to be a proper wage, but there has to be an active teachers union. There has to be proper negotiation. And I don't think there is. I don't, you know.
The teachers, there are two types of teachers in Timor. One is the civil servant, which is paid by the government. And the other one is, as mentioned by Helen, is temporary teachers, which is basically graduates from high school or whoever the school can grab, especially in the district level or in the suku level. They just grab whoever is available can teach the children. And unfortunately, those temporary teachers, they only get paid for the transport money, which is about $15 or $20 a month.
That's right.
So the civil servant teacher or the teachers who actually been teaching there, most of them are being, one is they've been in there for a longer time, and most of them are already 60 or 50 years old. So they are very status quo teacher type of person. So they teach following Portuguese way or methods where you listen to me, I'm the God, you have to listen to me because I'm the teacher, I'm always the right one, you're wrong. So that's the kind of teaching, the teacher that still exists, unfortunately, in the country. The second one, there's a young kind of mid-age or to young generation, and they full-time, but because they are because of the resources of the teacher, they're quite overwhelmed because they're not just teaching one class, they teach 2 or 3 classes. So it's quite overwhelmed for them to be in another course, for example, like Portuguese course, they have to do English course and all the other course. It's so overwhelmed for them that, as one of them, the point that Luis mentioned before, is that they are very textbook teacher. They just follow whatever is in there because they study the night before they go to school. So they follow whatever in there. They will, if you tell them something else, if they go outside the textbook, they're not going to follow you. They're just like, no, this is what I learned. This is what I'm going to teach. Unfortunately, that's the kind of teaching that still exists in the country.
Yes, I think what you've just said, Christina, is sadly very true, and a lot of the nature of the problem. And this is why the public schools, the government is struggling to produce any high quality public schools. So of course everyone with a bit of money goes off to a private school, or even elite private schools like Rui Sanati and the Jesuits and DIS.
The American ones, which the American one costs more money.
Yes,
yeah,
so you know, there is a I believe an inadequate discourse going on about the role of education. Now, I used to always say to people, oh, Timor never had the education for what debate, like most of the Pacific Island countries had when they came to independence, because they had big fights also about the relationship between technical vocational education and general education. And again, something Timor's never adequately had. The qualifications framework was written up by, I believe, Australians and New Zealanders, and is very Anglo-Saxon. And it's, you know, people at 15 have to decide whether to go to a technical vocational school or a general school. And when you're 15, you don't know what you're going to do, especially if you've had no careers education. And we brought in a person in our reform program, we brought in a person to deal with languages, all 3 languages. We brought a person to deal with careers education, who wrote up a good program for training a careers teacher in every school. We had somebody on librarianship, training a librarian for each school. And we had somebody advocating a better program for the selection and training of school principals, because school principals often don't have the vision of what it is their school is trying to achieve. There are some that are good, but unfortunately, a lot are not qualified in the management side, and including personnel issues. So there are huge things that can be ways in which education can be improved, not just the content of the course, but of course the philosophy, the important thing, the inquiry-based learning. How do you get people to believe that you, and unfortunately, I'm sorry to say, InfoDepi is not a good example of this, because they teach everyone in one block. They do the course in Dili, they do it in one block, then they go home, and then that's the end of it. And they get paid. They get their per diem to do it as well. So the wrong people go for the wrong reasons very often. And you don't have people doing it as we plan to do, have 1 day a week where you come to InfoDepi, you do something, then you go back and test it out in your school. Then you come back and tell people how it went, whether it works or not, whether it's a suitable method. And you've got to have people alternating between the training and their own classroom if they're going to really learn anything quite complex like inquiry-based learning. And you've got to provide them with very good backup materials, and in this day and age, they really do need to be on the internet. And there's a lot of other good stuff already on the internet you can refer them to. We wanted to set up a Moodle course, a Moodle network for every subject, and the teachers could find stuff on there, use it in their class, devise their own learning activities, and be helped by the general. And if things get out of date, they can then delete them and find other new stuff. They don't have to wait for the reprinting of the textbook, you know. Once you have a textbook, it's there for a long period of time because it costs a lot to reprint it. So a lot of thinking about so-called, well, 21st century skills. We did introduce this to Dulcie, and she was keen about 21st century skills, but they mean the whole way of reorganising learning about everything, about, you know, bringing together theory and practice and using it in contextual situations. Unfortunately, I don't see much. One or two people at UNTL are interested in this, and they are, as it happens, people that were working with Gert Gabrielson. but unfortunately, it's quite difficult. So I don't want to be depressing. What's the word? Pessimistic. But I think, Rob, getting back to Rob Gray, one of the things that made me ask you about Teachers for Timor is that somebody from somewhere else said to me, "Oh, can Teachers for Timor become a national organisation?" Because, you know, some people, retired people, would like to go and teach, spend some time in Timor, who don't necessarily live in Ballarat. And, you know, how widely do you think this could be? Could this be something like it be implemented? And obviously Willoughby Friends of Osu has had a very similar experience.
Yep. Steve Darmody has been in touch with me, and
that's good.
He sort of had a look at our Teachers for Timor pages, etc. Yeah, look, we've been able to attract teachers from South Australia, Melbourne, Sydney, and even one from the United States.
Wow.
Just through contacts and internet. Over the years, we've had a lot of broad appeal across lots of places to attract people to come and work in our program. So it does work. It does work, and expanding it to other areas would. It's a tough gig to set up and get it running within a community, but we're so entrenched in an RO that they don't want to lose us. We've got a room that we haven't used for 3 years, and other groups want to get in there and use it, and the powers that be say, no, we want Ballarat to come back and continue their program. So we are well thought of for the work that we've done, and we certainly have helped an enormous number get into the tertiary field through their English, or develop work opportunities through their English with interpreting and so on. We seem to have put things in the right place for that community. Not that we've made great advances for the community, but certainly people who've wanted to make that approach and get, a better English to help them along, it's certainly worked. Yeah.
Now, the other thing I wanted to ask you is whether there might be any possibility of getting Teachers for Timor into teaching some other subjects. And this is why I'm interested also, Louise, to ask you about, the Portuguese-speaking communities in Australia, whether any of them might be interested in going to Timor, in Teachers for Timor, to teach other things, like maths and science, as you have yourself.
As I said, I haven't been connected because I've been busy. But there is quite a number of people involved. I got contact when I was there, and then I went to the University of Aveiro. I spoke to them there.
Oh, yes.
But the problem is that there is this view that it's about direct instruction. There is no inquiry learning at all.
Oh, no. I think the idea would be to try and bring in inquiry learning, to introduce some concepts of inquiry learning.
And if we get into inquiry learning, in fact, what the teacher knows, it's immaterial. Okay, because the students are the ones that are going to be doing the inquiry. The teacher is just giving it some push one way or the other.
Yep, it becomes a student's research project. Yes.
That's right. So what we need, I think, is some people with some money that starts an experiment of setting up a school. Yes. Okay, so a philanthropic with a couple of million would do. So anyone on the call?
Oh dear. Gee whiz. Well, Peter's in the Rotary Club. The Rotary Club's a good fundraiser. But you don't think there are any existing schools, or it would be good to see something happening in a public school, a pilot project, See, what we've done with Ego Lemos and others in Permatil, a designer project-based learning, really alternative for the agricultural secondary schools, based on something I researched at New Caledonia for my PhD, actually, where they alternate between the classroom and the farm. Every science experiment they're doing, they test out on their own farm. Now, we are hoping to try and get one of the municipalities to request a ministry to set up a pilot project for this in their area, in a public school. What would in fact be a public school? I mean, you still probably need some philanthropists to fund some of the teachers who think to, introduce the ideas. But you need a lot of local people. You see, this is the thing in Timor. Within permaculture, there are people who do understand this in the field of agriculture. Although it's not popular by the Ministry of Agriculture, of course, it's not at all popular, but it is interestingly popular with the Minister of Education, or previous Minister of Education. So,
the same goes with the same goes with our technologies, like the electronics and all that stuff. You really need the kids to start doing stuff, and they
an
motivate
IT
themselves
subject, yes. Yeah. Well, now that's interesting, because in Melbourne, there is a fellow in Melbourne at the moment called Roberto Martins, who was in our team to reform the IT subject. He's doing project management at VU Masters, and he also had big ideas about portfolio assessment, because that is based on a high level of knowledge of IT, and if Timor had such a thing, they could be doing more like this. So maybe in fact, he's an apology. I did invite him to this meeting, but was unable to come. But maybe we could have a discussion on, teaching, bringing inquiry learning into schools in Timor via certain subjects, like perhaps IT, languages. Well, English is the one that Australians have expertise in. But again, I wondered if there are people in the Portuguese community in Melbourne. Do you know, are there many people in the Portuguese community in Melbourne interested in going to Timor to do a bit of teaching?
Personally, I don't. I haven't been attached to them for a while. I was the president of the Portuguese Association, but that was about 20 years ago.
Oh, I see. Now you're Australian.
So no help now, but things have changed a bit. And the number of Portuguese actually is diminishing in Australia. It's not growing.
Oh, is it? Right. Yeah. Yes.
So
a better life over in Portugal.
There are quite a number
anyway, look, it's 7 o'clock.
Brazilians, though. Yeah? There's quite a number of Brazilians.
Oh, Brazilians, actually, yes, Brazilians.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
well, anyway, these are all things we can think about. Thank you very much to the 6 people who stayed behind to the end, and 2 of you were here right at the beginning too. Wow. Yes.
Thanks, Alan.
I should look. I will put you all on the email group and send out some. I'll send out 2 notices about opportunities to visit Timor. One to observe the elections at the end of end of May, 1st of May, and the other one the TLSA conference in July. So that unfortunately no money to pay for either of them. But if any of you can get funding to come up to Timor, and we could have some discussions around the side on education during those 2 events. So
that would be great, Helen. I think I'll be funding myself to come.
Oh yes, you will be. Yes.
Yeah, I'm planning on it. I'm just thinking about whether
you're putting in an abstract
idea I've got is useful. Yes, I'd like to actually talk to you about potential, whether what I'm thinking about would fit in with the general theme of, what you've been doing or what's been successful. So that could be a conversation for another day, I guess, when I get back to Australia.
Good. Oh, that's right. You're on holiday in Malaysia at the moment. Yes,
I am. So I'm here
anyway.
with my husband, so he hasn't had his lunch yet.
All right. No, well, it's 5 o'clock here in Dili, so I've got to rush off with my passport to the
Right.
university because my
guys.
visa has become available. So all the
Well,
best.
that's
Great
amazing.
to see you all. Yes.
Great
Hope
to meet
see
you,
some
everybody.
of you. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye now.
Bye.
I'll switch this off.